Hello world and welcome to the program. This is Alex and my weekly episode of Ukrainian Unleashed, a podcast where you'll get along with Ukrainians and also observe how the global scenery impacts Ukrainian society in these exciting times. We speak about events, trends, individuals and lifestyles of modern Ukrainians. So let's jump right in. In today's episode, we will sneak a peek at Ukrainians' sex life and find out how things with sex culture and sex education are really going in Ukraine. You'll find out a lot of curiosities and maybe will be completely surprised by the revealed facts. Yes, they might turn out your perception of Ukrainian society, and yes, the data taken from official surveys, together with comments I've gathered especially for this occasion, will make this episode unforgettable, trust me. Stay calm and don't go anywhere. This you can only find here in Ukrainian Unleashed. Warning: this episode might make you uncomfortable because of the sexual content description and statistics given on people's sex life. Please press skip if you don't want to listen to it and proceed to one of the previous episodes. Hi, what's up guys? Hope you're safe and sound. This weekend while being online I ran through some news about that exactly a year ago the Hollywood Sanctum party took place in Kiev for the first time, which caused a lot of noise in the Ukrainian media, of course. Admission to this party cost a few $1,000 and the organizers didn't hide that there you could openly have sex with other participants. As it turned out from my research, Kink parties, BDSM parties, costumed masquerades for the audience of 21 plus years are regularly held in different cities of Ukraine. Here any contact between the guests is possible, starting from a simple conversation, petting, kissing, hugging, and of course finishing with sex. So first I decided to check with my Instagram followers whether the topic of sex in Ukraine would be of interest to the general audience at all and whether it is sufficiently covered in the media. Although I actually knew the answer to this question. Of course not. But just for your information, according to Pornhub statistics, Ukraine is a part of the top 20 countries by global traffic and number of videos viewed. Ukraine also is the only one among 20 countries where the word sex appears in search queries. Let me explain this. So the word sex is most often searched for in Ukraine, which may mean that many users among Ukrainians are just beginning to master the world of porn. Because it seems a little strange to come to a porn site and try to find something there with sex as the search query. Well, that's why I even became more curious at digging into the whole subject. The average age of Ukrainian Pornhub users is 34 years, and the most popular queries in 2019 were sex, anime, BDSM and MILF. But guess what? We know so little about national trends and sex statistics that trivial questions like at what age did most of Ukrainians have their first sex and what Ukrainians' most favorite sex toys are can really puzzle me. Let's check on that and see what sex life of Ukrainians looks like in numbers and what opinions most of the experts have about this. After all, sex is not only a pleasure but also the moral and physical health of the nation. Don't you agree with that? So today I guess we're gonna discuss the hottest topic ever published on this podcast channel. Ready, steady, go! The trend towards improving sexual health and exploring pleasure is slowly emerging in Ukraine. This is all part of the global narrative that is coming fast, but on this topic we still have a lot of taboos. It is rather difficult for women and men to talk about sex in general. I can say that for Ukrainians at the subconscious level, sex is something related to shame or lust. Most people still don't know that lubricants, for example, make sex with a condom more sensual and fun and serve not only for LGBTQ community members. But only a few people want to know about it. Understanding and knowledge always should come first. People's perception of sex in Ukraine is still quite superficial. As I see it, we learn about sex, but not about sex life. For me, it's like going to Egypt on an all-inclusive trip and calling yourself a traveler maybe. People avoid any sex, adventure and examination of their bodies. On the one hand, Ukrainians seem to progress significantly from what we had a couple of decades ago. On the other hand, sex remains our elephant in the room topic. It's a slow process of learning. We have a lot of layers that interfere, I bet. All that is deeply rooted in the legacy from the Soviet era, religious dogmas, and lack of education. To understand the nature of shame and inconvenience in conversations about sex in our culture, from my point of view, we should turn to Ukrainian history and Orthodox religion. In Eastern Orthodoxy, our body itself was considered sinful, and spirituality, vice versa, was positive, grace-oriented. In Christianity, sex has a reproductive function and is not intended for pleasure, as you know. The missionary pose was considered the only acceptable and unsinful. For a long time, love pleasures were condemned. Such people were called dirty, sodomites, and so on. In the times of USSR, we also had a special attitude towards sex in Ukraine. That's why it was never common in most of the families and in society in general to talk about it. For example, terms related to sex and sexual physiology are still often avoided in public, while swear words are more accepted. This shows us in particular a negative attitude towards both the genitals and sex itself, and it's definitely perceived as not so pleasurable. But the easy access to information that can enlighten the sexual life of Ukrainians and the desire to enrich the common sexual experience affect sexual culture in general and make people more intelligent. I bet that 3 years ago, events for adults where you could come half naked or in dog's latex suit and whip your partner in the presence of others could hardly be called parties. These could only be private encounters for a small group of people. Only the chosen ones knew the place and time, and a casual passerby wouldn't get the access to that. But today such events are becoming more and more large-scale, says Yulia Vasilyeva, the founder of Bondage Studio, a shibari master and organizer of fetish dance party. In addition, the Cherry Twins, a hotel with role-playing decorated rooms where you could put yourself into a queen's boudoir or torture room, is successfully operating in Kiev. In Lviv, for example, the famous Mazoch Cafe was launched as a tourist sightseeing a long time ago, and its menu, in addition to food, also consists of intimate performances. And people seem to like it. A large online survey containing more than 35 questions on various topics: sexual health, orgasm, infidelity, sex education, and people's acceptance of their own sexuality was conducted last year on the website of NVUA, one of the main media in Ukraine. About 6,000 people over the age of 18 filled out the questionnaire. The majority stated being heterosexual, 85% of respondents. 10% of respondents admitted their bisexual orientation, and 4% claimed being homosexual. There was also a field marked with Other for these questions, so that respondents could put their own description if it wasn't on the list. There were options like pansexuals, sexual attraction to people regardless of their gender and gender identity; heteroflexible, predominantly heterosexual people who occasionally engage in homosexual contact; asexuals, people not sexually attracted at all, etc. But I suppose this could be an interesting fact, as previously this question often wasn't even mentioned in most of the surveys, and the person who did not fit into the main option considered himself somehow excluded from the topic of discussion. Now people want and are able to experiment. I believe that more and more people are trying themselves in polyamorous relationships, moving away from traditional formats. Many call it fashion, but such things do not come out of nowhere, says sexologist Oksana Efremova. If it appears, then there is a demand for it, people have a need. For me, it is absolutely normal, of course, that people can feel absolutely free in different formats, she admits. Okay, so let's get back to the survey. So, the main source of getting knowledge about sex for most of the respondents in Ukraine were their peers, 30%, movies and TV series, 28%, books and magazines, 20%, older friends, 12%, and only in the last place, parents, 9%. Oksana Efremova says that this hierarchy was greatly influenced by Soviet culture of silence. First, sex was considered a taboo subject that was not discussed in public. Secondly, relationships were considered as the one and only way to lead a sexual life. Premarital sex was something indecent, and that's why a lot of people never heard about methods of contraception. Svetlana Kerimova, founder of the Women Inside Center for Women's Development, believes that there is one big problem with sex in Ukraine. Quote, "We don't spend enough time on sex education, while in Germany, for example, they start educating children in primary schools. Now teenagers are much more educated. They receive a phone at the age of 8 and a lot of information from the internet with it. Children get smarter very quickly. Most kids already know things that they are taught in senior classes at the age of 11, 12, unquote. Well, let's see what Ukrainian kids know about sex. Currently, the main source of knowledge for them is the internet, of course. More than the half indicated the online sources as the place where they searched the necessary information. Then, 41% of respondents go to the friends and peers. For 1 in 3, parents and teachers have become an important source of knowledge about sexual relationships. Therefore, we can say that the dialogue of the older generation with the younger is beginning to improve. Almost every 5th Ukrainian teenager stated that they have already had sex, 20% of those under the age of 16. About 35% of Ukrainians said they had their first sex at the age between 16 and 18 years. The other half of respondents, 45%, had their first sex in the age of 18 plus years. During the first sex, only 65% of the surveyed teenagers who already had sexual contacts used condoms. Perhaps safe sex is the toughest point in this subject. The need to use condoms and other contraceptives is allegedly talked about at school, on TV, written on billboards and told by doctors in Ukraine. But still few people take it seriously, to my mind. When asked about methods of contraception, 59% of general respondents said that they preferred to use condoms, 27% however mentioned pull-out method, and 8% female oral contraceptives like birth control pills. But the pull-out method is something very unpredictable. The probability that a woman will still get pregnant is quite high. In addition, it won't protect against HIV and sexual transmitted diseases at all. The fact that Ukrainians are not sufficiently aware of the issue of contraception is widely seen by the other options proposed by respondents. For example, someone said that they prefer to protect themselves with anal sex, consuming hormones, doing a blowjob, etc. No need to say that all these options also are helpless as contraceptives. While the creators of the survey also asked all respondents to name the ways in which HIV is transmitted, just to be sure that they know all of them. And most of these answers were correct. Almost all indicated 3 pathways: through blood, from mother to child, and by having sex. But in the next question, 43% of respondents said that they had never been tested for HIV or AIDS in their lives, and only 7% are regularly going through express testing. There were many of those who have been tested only once in their life in Ukraine. Women during pregnancy, because this is mandatory, and men during a medical examination at the military forces. Normally, you can get tested for HIV for free in specialized offices throughout Ukraine. Well, unfortunately, other figures follow up this case. Ukraine remains the leader in Europe in the scale of the spread of HIV. According to UN AIDS statistics, about 240,000 people live with HIV in Ukraine, and only 1 in 2 knows about their status. And since 2008, Ukrainians have been the most often infected by having unsafe sex. Most cases of getting HIV infection in Ukraine occur in young age between 15 and 30 years, as statistics say. When asked about preventive examinations, 50% of Ukrainians said that they visited specialized doctors such as gynecologists or urologists only when they started feeling unhealthy. Nearly 25% go to see a doctor once a year, 13% once every 6 months, and 9% have never visited such a doctor. Well, that's a shame, of course. As for me, I also admit that I really don't do this often, and I probably should think about seeing a doctor as well to walk the talk. Today, a completely different sexual culture is being formed in modern Ukraine. There are many sex bloggers and journalists who write about sex and sex education. Sexologist Oksana Efremova says there are people who still think that it is a shame to come to see a sexologist, of course, but in general the number of patients is getting bigger. Those who come to me are more open-minded, I can say, because they have already formed a particular request. Among her clients, mostly women and families, both monogamous couples and non-monogamous. Men come, but less often, she says. The age of her clients is between 25-45 years in general. Interestingly, almost 38% of Ukrainians said they used sex toys, and 8.5% regularly visit sex shops, according to the survey. In addition, 36% of respondents said they had nothing against having anal sex and have it on the occasion. A founder of the first Ukrainian sex shop, Nasoloda, Tatiana Yurchenko, commented on this subject, saying that the leaders of the Ukrainian market like 20 years ago are still vibrators and dildos. At the same time, the most popular size among Ukrainians is 18 centimeters, and the length of the largest dildo sold was 90 centimeters. But during the last 20 years, the variety of sex gadgets has become much wider. Manufacturers offer vibrators of various shapes and made from new elastic materials. Every year these models become even more technological. Now I think no one will be surprised by the ability to control your sex toys from a smartphone. Ukrainian women are often interested in vaginal balls, metal or silicone, which justifiably puts them in third place in the ranking of Ukrainians' most favorable sex toys. Many women now care about the quality of sex and engage in self-improvement, as the popularity of sex courses and training is significantly growing. And vaginal balls allow not only to improve women's health, but also to deliver the maximum pleasure to the partner by strengthening internal muscles. Number 4 in popularity in the Ukrainian market was given to anal toys, corks, beds and balls, and the 5th place in the ranking are occupied by underwear, costumes and accessories for role-playing games and BDSM attributes. After the release of the 50 Shades of Grey in Ukraine, the demand for BDSM accessories has grown by more than 20%, believe it or not. Lashes, gags, handcuffs, and of course a mistress suit. Premium segments toys are also in great demand among wealthy Ukrainians. One of the most popular products for them is high-quality sex dolls. Their price starts from $1,000 and is not limited to any framework, because the producers can make an individual doll to satisfy the most extended desires of the customer. Okay, so let's get back to numbers. Well, almost 90% of Ukrainians said that they regularly masturbate, 9% that they do not, 1% have never tried it. Moreover, 70% of respondents answered that they always reach orgasm during sex, and 22% rarely. 2% chose the option never. 42% of Ukrainians said that at least once in their lives they imitated it. In the next question, created especially for women, the organizers asked under what conditions it is easier to reach an orgasm for them. So 37% said that they always come to an end one way or another, 28% only when masturbating, and 12% confessed that they never reached orgasm. Well, I know that the pioneer in studying this issue was the American Betty Dodson. Now she is 89 years old, and more than half of her life she has been studying such a topic as female masturbation. Miss Dodson told other women how important it was to feel their own body and conducted workshops on masturbation practices. She wrote a book, launched her own website, and hosted a TV show. At the same time, 17% of Ukrainians confessed that they cheated on their partner at least once, and 15% did that constantly. However, 61% said they have never cheated on their partners. Wow, such a release. But it turns out that in 40% of cases, in one way or another, we talk about infidelity, and often not because of the shameless partners, but because of sexual dissatisfaction and mismatch of sexual types. By the way, 85% of Ukrainians consider sex one of the main components of a strong relationships, which they often prefer not to ruin, if any. It is no secret that our idea of what sex and orgasm in particularly should be is largely shaped by pornography. So, for example, if you watch a lot of porn, most likely they'd be of the same scenario. Almost all of the porn scenes are shaped to the visual orgasm of a man and the loud moans of a woman, which seem to signal that all goes well. And yes, according to the survey, 79% of Ukrainians watch porn, 14% don't watch it but find it normal in general, and 3% do not watch it because it is contrary to moral principles. Only 1% said they do not watch porn because it is indecent. By the way, the global statistics on porn revealed annually by Pornhub put Ukraine in top 20 countries by traffic in 2019. Wow, that's unbelievable. So, in 2019, sex switched places with anime to become the most searched for term in Ukraine, while BDSM remained third. Searches for MILF gained 12 positions in popularity, while femdom gained 86 positions and lesbian gained 30. Compared to 2018, searches for gangbang grew by 800%, public grew by 600%, and jerk-off instructions grew by nearly 600%. While when compared to the rest of the world, visitors from Ukraine are 700% more likely to view videos in the Russian category, 200% more into fisting, and almost 200% more into bisexual videos. By the way, in 2018, Pornhub found that Ukraine saw its mobile share grow by 40%, which gained a further 14% in 2019, bringing it closer to the worldwide average. But still, most of the Ukrainians watch porn from their desktops. Porn is one of the few areas that has hardly been affected by the coronavirus crisis. More and more people spend time watching adult videos without being able to go on dates or get in private encounters with people. Pornhub traffic has reached a new record on March 25. This day more people visited the website than in February before the pandemic. So, last month, 3% of Ukrainians said that they had sex much more often than usual, and 9% claimed that their sex life was also put on lockdown in March. The majority of Ukrainians, namely 35%, have not noticed any changes in their sex life over the past month due to nationwide quarantine in Ukraine. The survey also showed that 19% of Ukrainians usually have sex every 2 or 3 days, 9% once a week, 5% every day, the other 5% once every 3 or 4 weeks or less, and 3% once every 2 weeks. Another 14% didn't have sex in the last month, and 45% of respondents refused or could not answer this question. Why does porn sites traffic increase during the pandemic? I guess there are both social and psychological reasons for this. Social reasons include a decrease in business activity and any interaction with the environment. People had less opportunity to communicate, and this led to the fact that there is no opportunity to realize their sexual potential, which also includes companionship and professional communication. However, so far there has been no such possibility due to self-isolation. People didn't have the opportunity to carry out any activities related to work, sports, and so on. There was no opportunity to go for a walk with somebody, to meet new people. Even Tinder, that people used to use as a source of getting new contacts and sexual relationships, wasn't much of help. Therefore, by watching porn, people started using a compensatory mechanism when they were satisfying their social needs in another way. I hope that the sex life of Ukrainians after quarantine will only get better, and the sex culture in our country will eventually match with the global indicators. So I would like to end this conversation with a phrase that for many Ukrainians over the past 20 years has become one of the most life-affirming. Let's make love because we're worth it. Кохаймося, бо ми того варті. This was a new episode of Ukrainian Unleashed podcast. Thanks for being here with me. I also would love to thank Purple Panic for lovely musical compositions used in this episode. I'd really appreciate your comments, reactions, and subscription to our podcast channels in your favorite podcast app. And we did our best to extend our presence all over the web. And of course, check our pages in social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram accounts with fresh updates are waiting for you. Stay tuned for new episodes and keep safe.